the best non-scientific pH meter you get. It's like the cream of the crop for like a farm, right? So you are always welcome to come use it. And what happens is it has its own like diode sensor right here that you store in a buffering solution, and you put it in every time, and you lock it in. And what we're actually going to do, and I did this in advance because I don't want to take up too much time with this, but you calibrate it by using 4.01 pH solution. So this is like lab, you get this with the tool. This is exactly 4.01. It helps calibrate the sensor to know exactly what the 4.01 is, and then 7.01. We do 2-point calibration. If we were in a lab and the data that we were creating was going to go out in the world and be peer reviewed, we would do 3-point and also have 10.01. But this is good enough for a market. So then we have our pH sensor. We're going to turn it on.
You're giving me nightmares about doing pH testing.
Yeah, I know. Like stirring and these little sensors can get really thrown off, and that's why you actually have to store it wet in a storage solution. So you have little packets of solutions. It's fun, but stressful. And so when that water gets back to me, I'm going to test the pH of it. So that is city water, and that'll help us understand what the pH of our city's water is. My guess, unless Jorge got it from somewhere far away, or there was lemon juice in the bottle before.
Yeah. So it's from the Luling office. So
from the Luling office. Oh, it's going to be way different then.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Will you grab? Yeah. Nina, can you grab some from here too? We'll compare pH differences. Thank you.
This says 1221.
Oh, so it's really confining. Okay. When I let go of it, it was 593.
I don't lie. Many things.
I think it's useful to come occasionally borrow it. I don't think it's worth the investment. It's about $180. And so most of the home tests, there are those prong soil tests. Those,
okay.
I don't find those
I would rather go with the strip. If you really want to know now, get a little strip kit from Home Depot.
That's a great solution. Yeah, and that'll be in the pool chemical. And you're gonna dip in a little strip. It's gonna give you colors, and you're gonna match it. It's gonna give you a range. Yeah, and those are pretty accurate. Okay, so we've got our Luling water, and then right here, and we've got our New Orleans water. So our Luling water is. It's gonna be a perfect 7. It's 6 point.
Better for summer crops. Better.
It's hovering in that 7.2 pH area, which is pretty close to neutral. That's kind of statistically neutral. That's good, right? That means I don't know where does the water in Luling come from? Probably the river as well.
Yeah, probably the river. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and so then between, I'm gonna clean this. You keep cleaner for it.
What's in the cleaner?
I don't actually know what it's chemically made of, but I would assume some sort of ethanol or something, alcohol. And then after I clean it, we're gonna dip it into distilled water. Get this back. And then our New Orleans water is. We're already at 8.5.
Yikes.
Sorry.
For a long time, I was I grew up on New Orleans water, it's fine, and then I started learning science, and I was like, no!
At the same time, if you go to the store, they'll sell you fancy high pH water.
Yeah.
You're just getting it out of the tap, right?
It's true.
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
It's because it ran across, limestone under the ground or whatever. Okay, so this is... I think we're leveling out at 9.3. So that's very high, right? If you think about the pH scale, 9.3, bleach is going to be 12, right?
Yeah, something like that,
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Or maybe 13.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you let it sit the way we would to get rid of the chlorine,
Yeah.
would the pH change?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't either. I've never tried that.
I don't know the
Yeah,
answer
I've
to
never
that.
tried
I
that
would
one.
guess no,
You can wait and do the New
because
Orleans water again.
what's that?
Do the New Orleans bottle.
Hey, Andrew, if you don't mind, whenever somebody asks a question, we'll have an answer.
Yeah, my guess is going to be that it wouldn't because calcium is going to be your main culprit of pH, and that's not going to evaporate out.
No.
Yeah, chlorine is what's going to evaporate out mostly.
Could calcium titrate out because it's sticking to our pipes in our houses?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. Calcium, you could, kind of like to Mac's question, like you could get calcium to bind to something else that's above my pay grade, but you could definitely get calcium to bind to something or flocculate out.
Hmm.
Like a flocculant is anything that makes particles stick together and fall to the bottom. And I would assume that there's a way to flocculate.
It may be, but that's kind of like.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
water treatment plant.
Yeah,
type
I was just about to
stuff.
say that. I think that's like a treatment plant or something.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I have a friend who works at a water treatment plant. I'll ask him. Yeah. Okay. Any questions about water before I pass it over to the man of the hour about soil?
Quick question. Why did you say we shouldn't drink distilled water?
Oh, because it will slowly rob your body of nutrients because the water wants, like H2O wants to bond with things. And when you drink pure water, it will actually bond with the nutrients, like the minerals in your body. So it's too pure. Like you don't want something that pure.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Like
Yeah, like
it'll
if
take
you're-
salts out of your body. It can actually like dehydrate you.
Yeah, like if you're out like on a hot day and you're just drinking bottled water, like that can affect you.
Yeah.
And you'll just be sitting down, not wanting to move. So you want to drink at least a little something here and there that has some mineral in it. So like earlier today, I've been drinking tap water all day. So I just sat down and had a coconut water, has a little bit more electrolytes just to keep me properly hydrated.
It'll look like drinking Pedialyte when you're dehydrated or whatever. Like you want to have balance of electrolytes in your body. That would be on your plant when it's going to market. It could get someone sick, right? And that is something that if you are FSMA certified or if your farm meets a certain requirement in terms of how much it is producing a year, I believe it's over $100,000. Anybody more got a better brain than me right now? A year. Then you're gonna have to get certified for food safety practices to be, and then a lot of vendors will require that food safety certification in order for you to sell into them. So chain grocery stores will require GAP certification, Good Agricultural Practices certification, and FSMA stands for the Food Safety Modernization Act. So these tests are going to be more about human health and not really about the chemistry or the pH of your soil. The way that you would do this is you're going to request a test kit like this, and you would want to test, I think it's about once a quarter that you want to do if you're selling, food plants on the market. And this is to make sure that there's not like E. coli in your well water. And this is incredibly important if you use surface water in your irrigation or any kind of standing water in your irrigation. So I'm going to tell you a NARC thing that I don't personally care if you do or don't do, but there are rules about it, which is that you cannot use rainwater to irrigate a garden that you are going to be selling food from or like making a profit off of. I think it is technically a code violation to even use rainwater for irrigation of something that you eat yourself, but like there's not going to be any enforcement on that, and that's because that standing water could harbor microbial life. Obviously, if you're washing your produce really well and you're not immunocompromised and you're eating it in your home, like that is probably a hand-wringing concern. But if you're signing off that you're selling on a really big scale, you should follow the rules because you don't want to be liable for food safety operating. So this is what that would be for. And we're not going to really go through that today because it's not what we're here about. But we are going to use one of the water bottles from here. So what we are talking about that influences soil health is going to be two things. It's mostly going to be your total dissolved solids, which is a generalized reading for how much basically like minerals are in the water or any dissolved solid, but we can infer that they're minerals. So the higher number that you have in a total dissolved solid reading is going to mean it is like 99% of the time it means your water is harder, right? We've heard this term like hard and soft water. And so you've got this nice little chart on a total dissolved solid meter. So you want like ideal drinking water, which is going to be like reverse osmosis, distilled. We don't want to drink distilled water, but reverse osmosis or water that has gone through a distillation process is going to be 0 total dissolved solids. That means that there's no other solids in that water. It's pure hydrogen dioxide, right? H2O. Anything that's added, those often are things that are good for the human body. You just don't know what they are because you would have to send your water off to a lab to know exactly what the mineral components of that water are. So we don't, as humans, like actually want to drink pure water that much. You want to get minerals in your body, or mineralization in your bones and your teeth. And the same with plants. But when water is coming out of our tap, that hardness is often from treatment. So in New Orleans specifically, we're drinking water from the Mississippi River. That water is actually very acidic, but when it goes through an immense treatment process, it has to be brought to a really, really alkaline pH at the end because it gets limed, and that's also for taste. And so that means there is a lot of calcium in that water. And if you've ever seen the buildup of white on your terracotta pots in your home, right, those are those minerals. That's what that TDS is reading. It's all of that white gunk that is like not necessarily bad for you. It can also be sodium though. It is often bad for plants. So your TDS meter is going to show you how much of that is in your water. And it is going to be different home by home because the pH of your water is going to influence how much your pipes are corroding. And if your pipes are corroding, that's going to add minerals into your water. And also, if people remember when we had that saltwater intrusion issue and we were worried about the pH of water, one of the things that can do is actually increase the uptake of lead into your water because we do have lead pipes throughout the city and we don't know where they are necessarily. So when water is very acidic, it's going to leach that lead off of pipes more quickly. It's going to essentially burn it off, and then you'll be getting more lead into your drinking water. But TDS is going to be like a general number. Now, how it affects plants is that when we have a higher TDS and either a very high or very low pH, that is going to affect a plant's ability to uptake the nutrients that you are trying to get to it or that are available in the soil. So has anyone ever seen a nutrient availability chart? You do have one.
I'm wondering.
I usually have a photo, the one I usually carry, and I didn't bring it. Suffice to say, if you have a low pH on one side of the scale and a high pH on one side of the scale, right there in the middle is the ideal range for pH of soil of the plant to take up nutrients from the soil. When you go in either direction, too high or too low pH, different nutrients start becoming unavailable to plants. Essentially, you could put a ton of potassium around a plant, but if your pH is too high, too low, if your pH is too low, your plants won't be able to get, let's do phosphorus, it's definitely low with phosphorus. So if you have a ton of available phosphorus in your soil, but really low pH, plants cannot take up that phosphorus. So, pH in the soil. So now we're going to talk about that. I realize that's all Jorge's department. But when you water with low pH water consistently, say the water from the city of New Orleans that has been limed a lot, you are liming your soil. So you're going to have the number from your soil testing that you get maybe after a rain, which is going to be likely a neutral-ish pH, which is 7. You're going to have that soil, but if you were to dump a big bucket of city water on it, which might be a pH of 9.2, then that pH of that soil is going to go up on a regular basis. Okay, so that is why it's important to know what's going on with your water in tandem with what's going on with your soil, because your water is slowly changing your soil. Like if you dump 9.2 pH water on 7 pH soil, it doesn't make your soil 9.2 pH, but it will slowly raise the pH of your soil because soil has a buffering capacity, which you might or might not talk about today. But it basically, the buffering capacity means that it is not easily movable. It's able to protect itself to some degree. Okay, so with our total dissolved solids meter, is there? Oh yes.
Question.
Yeah.
Is there anything said water with municipal water all the time. Is there anything like a little tablet I can put into the city water or?
Not a tablet. Do you want an answer?
I mean, it'd be something like a water softener, but you wouldn't want to. That would be a.
Make
You'd
it
have
fall
to.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times, yeah, irrigation with like water that isn't full of dissolved solids is usually one of the treatments, which is also prohibitively expensive.
Or reverse osmosis, which is also prohibitively expensive.
Yeah.
And I think it's like a 2-to-1 where you actually end up pitching like half the water. So RO systems, reverse osmosis systems, which like sometimes like casinos have them, like places that spend a lot of money on plants will have reverse osmosis systems, but they're very wasteful. And that's not to say there isn't like sometimes nursing homes need to have them because of the local water or whatever. There are reasons to have RO systems, but they're prohibitively
Yeah,
expensive.
and like Marty was talking about the buffering capacity of the soil, doing things that improve your soil quality, so improving your organic matter, will help you increase that buffer zone to keep your soil in that healthy range.
Yeah, thank you. Like that is, I think, the best way to tie it back is if you have healthy soil, it's like if you have a good constitution, you're going to be less likely to get bad peer pressure, right? You want like confident soil that is not going to cave to the peer pressure of the bad water around it. Okay, and Jorge will talk about that. But the other thing, Mac, would be like, I know I said don't catch rainwater because it's not allowed, but rainwater is a great way to use to get water that doesn't have, it's essentially been distilled by the environment, right? And then the other thing is if you're worried about like a sensitive houseplant or something, a lot of stuff will evaporate off water if you leave it out long enough. So chlorine specifically, which is in treated water, will evaporate off of that water. So sometimes just like filling your watering cans and leaving them for 2 days, it doesn't make it go away, right? But it makes it better. Yeah. So, and then just praying for rain. Do you have just like regular tap water in that?
And just to kind of give you some field methods that you can do on your own to kind of gauge and track how your soil is doing. So why do we want to test our soil? Why are we worried about our soil? Does anybody just have any idea you want to throw out?
It affects our food.
That's right. It exacts food. Even if you don't care where your food comes from, if you just like to have a nice lawn, or if you just like to walk down the neighborhood and see nice plants, like you have an investment in the soil. So it is important to you to just kind of have an idea, an understanding of what is going on, especially if you're trying to grow food for your family, if you're trying to grow food as a business, just if you want nice plants. So one of the things that you can do is just keep track of it. So there's a lot of things that we can do to kind of track our soil, but it's good to get a baseline. So that's why I kind of like to recommend getting a soil test when you're getting started. That'll give you your first point of reference, and then you can use it over the course of years to see what you're doing, what's good, what's bad, and that'll help you make your choices so that you can get the most out of your land and you can put the most back into it. So if you open up the LSU Ag Center kit, there's the very first page. Actually, if everyone will pass these boxes around, because the order forms are in there, and I think there's enough for everybody, for sure. So inside your box, you're going to find an instruction sheet and an order form, a couple baggies for gathering your soil samples, and then it's already addressed to the soil sample lab at the LSU Ag Center. So the first thing they want to talk to you about is how to gather your soil samples. So a lot of y'all are probably growing on like a house lot or a very small lot. For the most part, you can get away with doing just one soil sample. There are reasons why you would want to test more, even if you're on a smaller piece of land. Say you just notice, like every season, you're like that corner over there, like the tomatoes never come up. So that might be something that you want to test separately for. If you're farming on grandma and grandpa's land, and you remember as a kid there was a shed in the corner, they always told you don't play over there because it's dangerous, and the shed's not there anymore. You might want to take a look at what's going on in that corner of your soil. That might be a candidate for getting like heavy metal testing. Because, as we've gone over the years, we're getting better at how we use our chemicals and how we keep them safe. But, when our grandparents were young and doing their thing, not necessarily as good, and the storage wasn't as nice. So sometimes you just have these old rusty cans out there dripping whatever on your soil, and you're gonna want to be interested in knowing if it's there or not. So if you go to the next page on your soil testing kit, it's just a simple order form. So here for like the basic soil sample, that's going to be $11 per bag. It's a pretty economical. A lot of places, if you go to like a private lab, you're going to end up paying a lot more money to get it. So LSU Ag Center is giving you like a real bargain on this. So what you end up getting is just like a basic, like your main nutrients that you're looking for in your soil to make sure that you've got a healthy, a healthy environment, a healthy amount of nutrients for what you're trying to grow. If you look at the back page, it also gives you some other soil tests. We'll talk about that later. But if you look right beneath it, there's 3 groups. As you can see, they kind of got crop groups here and there. So you can ask them on the front part of the ordering sheet. You can give them up to 3 things that you want to test for. So if you want to test for a whole group, and like you were talking about, like certain vegetables in different seasons require different things. These groups are kind of bunched up together as they kind of have similar nutritional requirements. So that way, if you want to test for all these vegetables, like if you're trying to grow all of these, making sure that you ask for group 2 is going to be ideal. It also has like trees and a few other things. So let's talk about some of the optional soil tests. So outside of the basic, you can test for organic matter. So that's something like if you're like putting in the effort to build up organic matter on your soil, get that baseline the first year, and then you don't have to test it every year. You can test it every couple of years and just see how you're doing. Because like for the most part, like if you're being environmentally mindful and you're doing things like cover cropping, you're gonna be successful. So you don't need to test it every year. So you don't need to put in that expense because it does get expensive. If you start testing everything all the time, you're gonna quickly add up the dollars. You test for aluminum, boron. Salt. So if you're worried that there's salt buildup on your soil, like if you notice like a white crust on the top of your soil, you may want to test for salts. Boron and aluminum, those are things that like heavy metals, so things that you might be worried about. If you know that the lot you're farming on used to be like an industrial site or a factory, whatever was there, you're going to want to do that. Same thing for lead testing. So a lot of those are for contaminants. So if you have an idea of what you think is there, it doesn't harm you to just go ahead and pay a little extra to get that soil sample just to make sure that you're growing in a healthy soil. And if not, you have the option of setting up some sort of raised bed system instead. Because like a lot of times, like remediating that type of soil problem is going to be almost impossible to pay for. Like if you're just if you're just like a regular person, you're not Jeff Bezos, you just won't be able to throw that money at it and solve the problem. So one of the easier solutions is to just get a raised bed, put a piece of plastic underneath so it doesn't touch the soil, and you're good to go. So let's talk about how to gather your soil sample. So we got our baggie over here. Hey Terrence, do you have any particular? I'm sorry.
Can I ask you something before that?
Sorry.
Go ahead. Maybe you'll talk about the soilless potting mix versus soil.
Okay. Well, that can be a little different. So a lot of times, like when you do like a potting mix, it's a little more homogeneous, so you don't have to test as deep. So if you're testing like a soil that's in the ground, you'll probably want to go a little bit deeper, get a more comprehensive sample. So over here, hey Terrence, are there any particular spots that you want to sample, or do we want to do like a mixed up sample for the whole site? Do you know if there's any problem spots or anything?
Only problem spot I think is on the other side.
On the other side?
Yeah.
Well, if you want, we can do that later.
Okay.
But
So these were all raised beds. I'm assuming they were all put together around the same time?
Some of them are a bit older than others, but
But
basically.
you generally are using similar soil.
Mhm.
Okay.
So we
would
can like
he have to? Could he just go from that bed to that bed and fill one bag with a lot of the beds? Or
yeah, you can do that if you
Mhm.
want. Like I said, if you're confident that everything's kind of functioning at the same level, go ahead and you can take one. You can literally just pick one bed or do all the beds and just mix it up in a bucket. Just give it a good mixing and then throw it in this. This is like a half pint or a pint-sized bag, and that's all I need. And then you make sure you label it. Whatever you label it, they'll actually put it on the test results. So that way, whatever you decided to be like, oh, this is my strawberry patch, or this is plot A. Whatever you put down, that's what they're going to label it as. I would put my name on it too. So, sometimes in the lab you get your samples mixed up, and then you're like, who did this come from?
Mhm.
So if you put your name on it, that helps the lab assistant quite a bit.
Yeah.
So we're just going to go and pick a bed, and we're just going to take our soil sample. So if you're in ground, you're going to want to go a bit deeper. Here in these raised beds, we know that we're kind of using. We brought in all the soil at the same time. It's going to be kind of the same general. There's not soil horizons in the way that you would find in natural soil. So you're just going to come in here, you grab a good scoop, and in this case, we're just going to go ahead and just do one, for example. So we're just going to grab soil from one spot. Say it's your front yard and you think everything's about the same. zip it up, label it, and you just send it off to the lab. So that box is already pre-addressed, so you just got to go to the post office and take the post and fill out the form and put in a check. Because if you don't put in a check, they won't send you anything.
Prepaid
It'll
post.
sit on the desk.
It's not
A
prepaid
check.
post?
No, the postage is not prepaid.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's a flat rate box. Okay.
Yeah, but it's one of those flat rate boxes. All right, so let's grab inside your folder. You'll have a result sheet, and we can talk about what you're seeing here. As you can see, they have just some basic information about the lab. The label that you put down is going to be right there in that box over here in the top corner, and then it's going to say results. So, as you can see, they're testing for several things. You've got your pH, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, sodium, sulfur, copper, and zinc. So those are kind of like the basic things you want to keep track on. And then you were talking about how like the parts per million, all these things, like it's not very clear about what's going on. Even this isn't terribly clear. So what they have here, this person picked two different things. So they're running a pasture. So they probably have cattle or some other livestock. So they picked two different types of grasses. And then underneath that, you see there's just like a high, low, very low. So that can be confusing. So when you're looking at something that is low, you're usually talking about 50% or less of the plant's capacity to reach its full potential. If you're looking at very low, if you're looking at low, that's probably like 50 to 75%, and then high is like 50 to or 75 to 100, and very high is even above that. So what that's telling you is how much, like if you added nutrients, how much you could possibly improve. So like for very high, adding nutrients doesn't make any sense. Adding that particular nutrient doesn't make any sense. Right? You already have it there. It's available for the plants. Don't bother. If you're seeing something that's low and you're noticing your plants aren't growing like you want to, that may be something to look into as a soil amendment. So with soil amendments, as part of the NRCS, I'm not allowed to make any sort of particular amendment recommendations, but you could talk to Asha, who's our extension agent from Southern, and she will be able to guide you through the process and help you hopefully select something that works for you. Because, a lot of people don't want to add, chemical fertilizer. They want to do something natural. You can work with her and she can kind of guide you towards a solution that makes you happy.
Didn't they used to do that? I remember years ago I did this and they wanted to know, are you doing organic?
Yeah.
And then they would give you the suggestions.
Exactly. Like, you have to be your own advocate for you. Just make sure, because if you go to another county agent that's not Asha and she doesn't kind of have the idea in mind of what goes on here, they might push you straight into chemical because, they've been doing conventional ag for years. That's what their thought is. They're like, hey, go buy this thing with these 3 numbers. Mm-hmm. And just go to Home Depot and get that thing. And that's not necessarily what you wanted to put in your soil. So, yeah, make sure you talk to your extension agent and let them know what you want, and they can help you find the best solution for it. Looking at that form, do you see anything that you want clarified? Underneath that, they have a recommendation. So that's like pounds per acre of that particular application that you would need to get to an optimum number. And then, let's see, below that, it gives you your nitrogen, your phosphate, and your potash numbers. And those are, the same thing. So one of them is for Bahia grass. So it tells you what you need to establish it. So that would be your initial application. When you have your animals grazing on it, what you need to keep it healthy, and then what you need once you're turning it into hay or you're converting it to hay and you're going to sell it. With the ryegrass, it's just listed for grazing, and that gives you the same recommendations. And that's kind of it. Is there anything in particular that you want to know about within what you're seeing on that result sheet? Huh? So if you're looking at low, that means you probably want to add something to remedy that deficiency. There's a bit of a deficiency. So if you want your plants to grow to the maximum, you don't always have to. It's your garden, it's your goals. So you can add some chemical or some sort of nutrient to your ground to see if you can get better results out of it. Once you get into high and very high, you're usually not going to get very much in terms of a benefit if you apply, a bit of fertilizer. Oh, sorry.
Or what I'm assuming is that you don't want everything to be super high and you don't want everything to be super low. If you were looking at
Well, sometimes the fact that it's super high isn't necessarily bad. That's just what the natural conditions are. So it may be because that you're working on a former farm, and that farmer just putting chemical out, and that's why the numbers are high, and that may be something you want to address. So if you know the history of the land, that also helps. But a lot of times that's just the natural condition. Different soils across the country have different chemical compositions and availability. So if you see a high number, that's not necessarily bad. That's just what it is.
Okay, so in this particular case, you have pH 1-to-1 water. Is this water pH? Or
No,
is
no,
this
that's
soil?
so that's dissolved in water. That's soil that's been dissolved in water.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so it says this particular one has 6.88, which is fairly neutral.
So it's fairly neutral. It's a little bit acidic.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this particular grass must want a lower pH because it says that that's high. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Because it says high.
Mhm.
All right.
So yeah, that'll give you
All
your
right. So
nutritional.
if you add, thank you for putting up with me.
Oh no worries. Yeah.
So if it says sulfur on here. So it's low in sulfur. So if you
Yeah.
add sulfur,
Yeah.
you're going to lower the pH even more.
Remember, we're talking about the buffering capacity. You're not going to end up adding the amount of sulfur that it would take to raise or change that pH. Changing the pH is very, very difficult to do. Like it's one of those things. Like people will come in and ask all the time. It's like, hey, I want to change my pH. The amount of anything you will need to add is just yeah, exactly. So that's why you want to do things like build up your organic matter. That gives you that buffer zone. So if you're kind of in that sweet spot, but you're worried that the water is going to change something, making sure you have a good amount of organic matter in your soil will help you combat that.
So are you saying that the organic matter, like leaves or compost and sticks, is
Yeah.
acidic or just not?
No. It's it actually does tend to be more acidic, but what it does is it creates places for your nutrients to like attach to. So things that are good, things that are not as good, they'll stick to that organic matter, and they won't necessarily. They'll be there for your plants if you need them. If they're not, they just kind of hang out inside that organic matter. So it kind of gives you a buffer of protection, having that organic matter in your soil, and that just makes it makes nutrients just more available.
Can you test your compost pile?
You can test your compost pile for sure.
Okay, so right before you think, okay, I'm ready to go put it in.
Yeah, just grab a little sample, send it in, and see what you got.
Coffee acidic?
Coffee tends to be acidic, yes.
I always look at soil testing as your report card. Even before you took the test, you got a new piece of land. I don't know anything about this land, but I need a report on this soil. I need a report on this land. So that just give you a benchmark of this is where I'm currently at.
Things that you can do very easily at home. I have tools for some of these things. You don't necessarily need them. Like I've got this really fancy, what we call a penetrometer, and it's used to measure the resistance if you're trying to go put something in the ground. So it kind of gives you an idea of like how hard a root will struggle to go down the profile. But you can also do that with just one of these pin flags that they've got around here in the garden. And that'll give you kind of the same idea. You don't need to spend a lot of money on one of these. You can just use a flag. So that's kind of what we're gonna do when we fill out the soil health scorecard. All right, so let's start from the top. So soil cover. How well is your soil covered? If you look at the soil that we have here, it's mulched. It's got plant residue. More than 75% cover. Like I said, there's a bunch of mulch. There's mulch of different sizes. It's good stuff. They've added shells. There's plenty of cover there. You always want to keep your soil covered in some way, shape, or form. I know that here, when it gets too hot, they go ahead and just put down cover crops. So there's just something sitting on the soil, making sure that it's being protected. That is something we can help you with at NRCS. If you wanted to have a recommendation for a crop rotation and a cover crop, we can help you plan that. So that can help you address a variety of issues. So we were talking about compaction. Actually, we'll get to that when we get there. So residue breakdown, the natural decomposition of the stuff in the soil. So like we were talking about, like we've got these big chunks of soil, and then you got these itty bitty ones that have been slowly breaking off the bigger pieces of mulch. So you've got a good breakdown. That means that it's active, that it's alive. Next thing is surface crust. So surface crusting can be good or bad. If you live out in the desert, crust might be like your best available option to have a protected soil. And yeah, if you're ever like at one of your national parks out west, stay on trail. Just just it makes me feel better if I tell you that stay on trail, because those biocrusts in the desert, they can take decades or even longer to form. So when you go off trail, you're like breaking up a very delicate ecosystem. So do your best, be disciplined, stay on the trail. There's going to be another great Instagram photo just like 100 yards down the trail. You're going to see it. It's going to make you happy. You won't even remember that you wanted to step off trail to go get that photo because you look so good in this one.
Yeah.
All right.
Is that the whole idea of no-till gardening as well?
That is also no-till gardening. Yeah, you're trying to stop that disruption, so you get like the proper amount of organisms in your soil in the right ratios. All right, ponding and infiltration. So we're looking to see how well the water is eaten by the soil, and that can be a function of your materials that you're using, compaction, which is what we test with this penetrometer, and just general the general quality of the soil. So like a clay soil may make it hard for the water to infiltrate depending on the type of clay. A sandier soil will readily eat more water. So that can be something that we can talk about texturing a little bit later, and I can show you how it's done. It's kind of a weird, inexact science, but it's also fun to do if you like to hold soil in your hands. So we can go ahead and try that. All right, penetration resistance. This is what we've been talking about. So you can get one of these boys and just stick it in the soil. It's got actually two different types of tips. So if you know your soil is softer, you use this wide one. If you know your soil is going to be a little tough, use the little point. So all you do is you put it down and you push, and the needle here didn't move. This is really soft soil, really well taken care of. You're usually having compaction issues, like if you're on a house lot. There's a house sitting on it. There was concrete sitting on it. That's where you're going to see some compaction issues. When you're working on a farm, normally the compaction layer is right below where your cultivator implements are. So where your plow went, right beneath that surface, that's where you have a hard pan and the roots are struggle to go through it. And that's something you can address with a cover crop, which is really, really simple to do. A lot of people like to add some sort of tuber like carrots or radishes, and that'll just go down in the soil. I've seen pictures of people who use cover crops and they'll have carrots in their mix, and you'll see just like a regular carrot, and then it gets pencil thin when it hits the hard pan, but it fights through it. And then underneath, there's just like another regular sized part of carrot. Yeah. So it's out there. It's doing work for you. It's there to help you. So if you want to address some of these issues, you can come with me or talk to Asha. We can help you plan a cover crop.